Hello and welcome to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. I am your host, Shawn Needham, along with my wonderful wife and producer, Janet. And we are in the studio today at the AM 1470 KBSN studio in Moses Lake, and we have Julian Martinez with us today. He is a representative of Ortho Molecular, and Ortho Molecular is a company that Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy has been working with since 2011. Ortho Molecular Products is a company that sells nutritional supplements. And we're going to discuss a little bit about it. There's a lot we could discuss, but we're going to focus on about 4 things today, along with just a general topic. So I will start out with just a quick introduction of Julian. Julian's been working for Ortho for a little over a year now. Is that correct?
Right.
Yep. And he's wonderful, knowledgeable, has a history of some health and wellness stuff, and he can get into that. So with that, I'll let him take over. Julian, tell us a little bit about your history with Ortho and your history before you were with Ortho, and what made you decide to take a position with Ortho.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shawn. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
My background is actually in health and wellness, and for the last 8 years before I was with Ortho Molecular Products, I was a foundational strength coach.
Wow.
So I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but really what I focused on was helping my clients move more efficiently, live better by working with foundational movements such as the hip hinge, the squat, the push, the pull, and unilateral exercises.
That's awesome. We can have, by the way, we can have a radio show just on that.
Yeah. I'd love to come back.
I could do that. We could do that. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I'm big on that. I've been certified through NASM, NFPT, but the one that I was really excited about. So any trainers that are listening or physical therapists, I got certified through Dr. John Rusin, pain-free performance training, and it was phenomenal. But a couple years ago, I started to venture out and look at different opportunities, and I landed on Ortho Molecular Products.
Okay.
And I just really loved the vision, the mission of the company. It really aligned with what I was doing as a foundational strength coach. Ortho Molecular Products has been around for 31 years, and they're known for using high quality raw materials, creating therapeutic formulations that are efficacious. That's the big thing. There's a lot of questions on which supplements to use, which companies to use. But after working for Ortho, I realized the differences between the companies, and I'm really excited to talk about more Ortho Molecular with you.
That's awesome. I'm so excited for you to be here, and be part of the show. So call in. This is a live show, and use Julian as a resource. He's incredibly knowledgeable about supplements and a lot of stuff, health and wellness, anything exercise related or diet and nutritional supplement related. So call in, be part of the show. 509-765-1470. So one of the things I like to talk about supplements, and this is why I call them supplements, and some patients might need, or listeners, viewers might need some education on what a supplement is. So sometimes they're just called vitamins, sometimes they're called nutritional supplements, and when I use that term supplement, I mean just what it says. I think it is just what it says. It's a supplement. It's a supplement to our healthy eating and lifestyle already. And can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely, Shawn. I'm glad you said that. That's something I preach to all the doctors I work with, all the family and friends I work with, that supplements are meant to supplement lifestyle modifications. First and foremost, exercise and diet are extremely important. We don't want to rely solely on supplements, but they also do play a huge role in really optimizing our life and our health. But starting off with, the food that you eat, the movements that you do every day is really the most important part.
So I'm just going to piggyback on that a little bit, and I'm not trying to correct you on the air, but because I know you know this, and we're going to talk about adrenal insufficiency later, HPA axis insufficiency. Is that correct?
Yeah.
But rest is probably more important than both those things.
Oh, you're right. You totally caught me on that.
Right.
Absolutely. I just, I mentioned, I don't know if I told you this, but I got off social media. Nothing, I know I'm big on social media, but for me personally, I wanted to make a little change, make an adjustment.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing what I noticed was rest. I got better rest, and with rest, I was able to really perform better at my job.
Absolutely.
I was able to, study harder. I was able to exercise harder, and it's really because I'm able to get 6 to 8 hours of really high quality undisturbed sleep.
Yeah. Well, one thing I've said on the show before, and I like to reiterate it, this is why we just push these things over and over again, is that we will die without sleep before we'll die without food.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that.
Right.
And we don't have to exercise to live, but we do have to have food and rest to live. So,
right.
So, well, I appreciate that. And, we sell supplements at our pharmacy. We sell ortho supplements at our pharmacy. And both you and I, we make a living doing that partly. Yet, I think it's important to let our listeners and viewers know that, what the overall picture of what we believe is, because and I think what we do, because that's what I do in my life too. I don't live off nutritional supplements, but I do take them because they're an adjunct, I think, to go along with a good healthy lifestyle. So speaking of that, let's go into the first one, and I'm going to be biased here, and I would love your opinion here, but vitamin D3, and I tell my patients that if there's one supplement you can choose to take, and you only have a choice to take one, I choose vitamin D3. And the reason why is because almost everyone, which is a powerful statement, almost everyone is low in it if they don't supplement. And because of the nature of vitamin D, it having a cholesterol backbone, it is a hormone in itself, so it affects so many things in the body. It's not just about bone growth, like what I learned in pharmacy school. Vitamin D was basically important for bone growth, and that was it. But it's also important for, seasonal affective disorder, depression. It can help for many, many different things. So I think vitamin D is the most important, and I think it's important to get the right dose. So can you kind of educate us on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. And I always like to state that any states above latitude of 37 degrees, so that's like Northern California, Northern Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and then all the connecting states, everything above that is going to have, they're going to be at greater risk of vitamin D deficiency. And originally...
So explain that. Explain why they are.
Well, those states or those areas just really don't get the same UVB or the vitamin D that the other states below 37 degrees gets, right? So when we're not exposed to the sun, we're not able to synthesize vitamin D. So that's where supplementation comes in play. I'm not saying it's I'm not saying it's the only thing that we should be doing, but during the time of seasons like winter, I live in Seattle, and we get very little sun up there or down, over there. So,
although it was a pretty nice day there yesterday.
It was. I was talking to my fiance, and she said it was. She got a couple days of sun, which is great. But we don't get as much sun as, say, San Diego.
Right.
So the recommendation for dosing of supplementation is going to be entirely different than someone who lives in San Diego.
Right.
But understanding that this is a vitamin that's essential not only for bone growth, but just really to optimize health. And we're seeing a lot of emerging research that we're seeing vitamin D deficiency in a lot of chronic conditions.
Right.
So optimizing our vitamin D levels at a therapeutic dose, it's really important.
Yeah. So just for our listeners and viewers out there, just to let you know, because I want to educate you about what I learned in pharmacy school. And I learned in pharmacy school that vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin. So you got to really, really be careful about overdosing on it. And I mean, there's some truth on that. So you have to know the dosing, because it is fat-soluble and it stays in your body for a while. In pharmacy school, I learned that the typical dose of vitamin D should be 400 units a day, international units a day. And a lot of multivitamins, thus, have about 400 international units a day. If you look at most calcium supplements, they have about 400 international units. So, and when But the reality of it is, to get optimal levels, to get your vitamin D level to optimal levels, at least in the patient population that I see around this area, you need between 5 and 10,000 units of vitamin D a day. So that being said, just like Julian said, it depends on where you live. We have a patient in Alaska, and it almost I had to ask her 2 or 3 different times because I almost couldn't believe it. In the winter, to get her vitamin D levels up to optimum level, she has to dose at 50,000 units daily. Now, my most common recommendation for vitamin D to my patients is 50,000 units once a week. And one of the reasons why I think vitamin D is so expensive also is because, and it should be your go-to supplement, not because it just does so much, but almost everybody's low in it, and it's very cost effective. It really is not super expensive. So I recommend once a week dosing because it can be better for compliance. And at 50,000 units once a week, the patient would get about 7,200 units a day, which falls right between that 5,000 to 10,000 units daily. So that's my go-to when it comes to vitamin D. Do you have any comments on that?
No, I absolutely agree. I typically recommend vitamin D 5,000 daily. I do recommend vitamin K supplementation is a great combination, especially for bone support. But you nailed it at 5,000. I also like to state that everyone's going to be different. So someone who's heavier, right? So if the heavier you are, it's going to be different ratios as far as vitamin D supplementation.
Yeah, you're going to need a bigger dose.
Right. So I always recommend that, and then or suggest that, but also to test. Every 6 months, test. Especially if you're on a regimen of doing 5,000 to 10,000 international units vitamin D, then I do recommend testing every 6 months just to see where your levels are.
Right. And realize it's important to know how to interpret that test also. Normal doesn't necessarily mean optimal. So when you look at most of those lab tests, the normal is 30 to 100. And I won't go into the units there. I won't bore you with the units, but just realize that just because you're in the normal range doesn't mean optimal. From a lot of the research, to be optimal, you need to be over 60.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. So yeah, I think vitamin D is one of the biggest things for your buck that we can do. Now, speak a little bit about vitamin K, because sometimes, myself included, when I first learned about vitamin K2 to help bone support, I'd get it confused as a pharmacist with vitamin K1. So explain that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a big fan of vitamin K2, especially, I have a horse in the race, but Ortho Molecular has an exclusive on MeniQ7 Pro, which is the most studied form of K2. But really, K1 is you'll get K1 from vegetables. K2 supplementation is it has a longer half-life, right? So it's a little bit more researched. So what I like about it is that the K2 that we have has been studied to activate, not to get too geeky, but activate 2 proteins, MGP and osteocalcin, to ensure that calcium doesn't get deposited into the arteries and gets deposited into the bones. So we know that vitamin D is great for bone health. So doing a combination therapy of vitamin D and K, they work synergistically together to optimize bone health and lower cardiovascular risk.
Absolutely, and that's a very important thing. So mention one thing I like. It's an interesting story, and we can piggyback on this after our break. We're going to go on break shortly, but it's interesting to know how vitamin K1 gets converted to vitamin K2. I don't know if you've heard this story, but it only happens it happens like if you can get vitamin K2 from beef, but it has to be grass-fed beef, because the beef when they eat the grass, they convert K1 to K2.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a very interesting trivia, I guess, but also it's scientifically. So tell me a little bit about that before I break.
As far as the conversion?
Yeah.
As far as the K2 conversion, I think that's where you really want the form. Are you talking about like how it's converted, or the differences between K1 and K2?
The differences.
Yeah, so the K2 is what has been actually clinically studied to activate the 2 proteins, and is what we want. But I think at the end of the day, unless you're having grass-fed beef and so on, then you need to supplement.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, that's a good place for us to go to a commercial break. You are listening to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Call in, be part of the show. 509-765-1470. We'll see you in a few. All right. Welcome back to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, where Team Needham discusses everything healthcare. If you missed our first segment, I have Julian Martinez in the studio with me. He's a representative from Ortho Molecular Products that specializes in high-quality nutritional supplements. So we talked about vitamin D and vitamin K a little bit, so I'd like to move into essential fatty acids, more importantly, omega-3s. So tell me what you know about those, Julian.
So I think it really goes back to the early 1970s when we studied Greenland Eskimos and why they had such a low cardiovascular disease rate, right? And in 1970s and 1980s, I think with the low fat diet was actually the bigger thing.
Right,
so we were really raising question on what's going on. What are we doing that they're doing? And really what they were able to conclude was that the Greenland Eskimos had a 1-to-1 omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. So, to go into it, omega-3s, fatty acids, it's if we can get closer to that ratio, we're going to reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease.
Okay, and omega-3s, just for simple minds like myself, omega-3s, when I think about them, are non-inflammatory, and omega-6s are inflammatory. So that's the fat you want to stay away from, correct?
Right.
Okay, all right. So speak of the differences. So Ortho has a great product, an omega-3 product. Mm-hmm. Speak of some differences of that with the EPA, DHA. Speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is what I really love about Ortho. One, we're a research-based company. So when we formulate, we make sure that the research supports our formulations. But then also quality. A lot of people ask me, what are the difference between, getting Ortho Omega 820 versus going to Costco and getting a big bucket of fish oil? And really, it comes down to the quality. The quality. I mean, when we test our products, we make sure that we have low total oil oxidation scores. We make sure that that we have a high concentration of EPA-DHA ratio, and our formulation is in a form of ureaesterified triglycerides. So not to get too geeky, but it's in the form that nature intended us to have fish oil. It's like eating fish.
Better absorbed.
Right. Yeah.
Correct. Now I will tell you this. This is truth, and if your fish oil smells like rotten fish or it tastes like rotten fish, it's not high quality. And we do a taste test in our pharmacy. We bought some fish oil from Walmart. We bought some fish oil capsules from Walmart, and we did a taste test, and we bit one open, and our pharmacist was so grossed out when she bit the Walmart product open, she almost threw up, and she had to spit it out. Whereas Orthos, and I don't necessarily, recommend buying their capsules, although you can, but she bit that one open and chewed it, and it was very palatable. So it just goes to show of the high quality and the freshness of the product. So why should we take fish oils, omega-3s? Yeah,
I think that really goes back to what we started our conversation on, where we want to take omega-3s to supplement our lifestyle, right? Yeah. So I believe, I can't remember the exact amount, but I know you have to have about pounds, maybe 2 to 3 pounds a day to get a high dose of omega-3s. And really, with today's food industry, we know that to increase shelf life, they had to add omega-6s to foods. So we're more exposed to we're exposed to so many different foods that have high omega-6. To really balance out that ratio and not have to eat 3 pounds of food, I highly recommend supplementing 2 grams to 3 grams of omega-3s every single day.
So, and let's realize Julian alluded to it a little bit, but fats have got such a bad rap. But now we realize that fats are good. Every cell in the body requires fat. So fats are good, especially good fats. And realize when we talk about essential fatty acids, realize they're called essential because our body cannot make them. So we need to get them from an external source, from eating or from supplementation. And really, in order, if you do any kind of, we work with some doctors that do different cardiovascular testing to look at those lipid levels, and in order to get those good healthy fats, you do have to supplement. You couldn't eat enough salmon. Maybe you could, but like you say, 3 pounds of salmon a day. Most of us just aren't going to do that. So right. It's important to supplement. So let's go ahead and move on to probiotics. Before we do that, be part of the show. We'd love to have a caller, 509-765-1470. Take advantage of Julian's expertise today. So let's talk about probiotics. Probiotics is another one I think that's really important. Probiotics is just what it says. Pro meaning for, biotics meaning like life. There's good bacteria normally, and it's not just bacteria necessarily, but Julian's going to educate us a little bit about that. So what is your opinion of probiotics, and tell us all you know, or at least some of what you know, because we know you know so much. It'd be a radio show on that.
Yeah, I don't want to lose listeners by going too geeky with it, but really, at the end of the day, there's a lot of good, strong, powerful research on probiotics now, as far as supporting patients with GI enteropathies or dysbiosis. And as far as formulations, this really goes back to how Ortho formulates. We do constant stability testing, and we put expiration dates on our products because we want to ensure that what is viable in this, especially when we're talking about living organisms, right? We want to make sure that they're actually in there and they're viable. And that's kind of one of the dirty tricks that I really learned when I moved into working with a professional supplement company, is that a lot of retail, they put manufacturing dates on there. And all they have to prove when they do that is that when they made this product, it had this in it. They don't track the type of degradation that it has. So doing any type of combination therapies or having live organisms, you have to do constant stability testing to make sure that everything that you say is in here is in here. But this is also meant to supplement your lifestyle. If you want to have a healthier gut microbiome, I would recommend diversifying your foods, having high quality vegetables, going for organic, adding dietary fibers, complex carbohydrates. This is a little bit harder, but I do recommend rotating your produce. Try to go with the seasons, and then staying away from things that really trigger any type of GI discomfort. And an example is me. Occasionally I love eating pizza, but I know dairy doesn't sit with me that well. But yeah, those are the type of things. Maybe I know everyone's not perfect, but yes, trying to control those things and having a daily probiotic to help with more like maintenance prevention. I highly recommend supplementing it.
Yeah, me too. So, and one of the things is, I think a probiotic is probably just as important as a multivitamin. Yeah. And here's what I like to tell my patients is that, so we have good bacteria in our intestinal tract, or we're supposed to. So, and any time we've been hit with a round of antibiotics, which most of us have, and of course, there's a lot of our foods that have antibiotics in them already, whether it be chicken or whatever that are high in antibiotics. So that can kill our good bacteria in our intestinal tract, and our intestinal tract is important for overall health. It is probably I'm not going to say the most, but one of the most important. And why do I say that? So all of our nutrients and all of our nutrition is absorbed through our intestinal tract. Mm-hmm. So if we don't have a healthy intestinal tract, the food we are eating, we are not absorbing the nutrients correctly, at least not maximally, optimally. So, and having a good, healthy microflora in our intestinal tract is important to help digest those foods, help digest and help it so we can absorb those nutrients. And a good, healthy probiotic, a good quality probiotic is part of that picture. Some of our listeners, viewers may have heard of using, yogurt that is high in lactobacillus acidophilus, something like that. And one of the issues with that is, the volume is kind of like eating 3 pounds of fish a day. Right. You would have to eat 3 tubs of yogurt a day, 3 pints of yogurt a day to get enough concentration of the bacteria normally. So that's why I recommend supplementation. Like I said, I think it's just as important as a multivitamin, because if you're not absorbing the multivitamin and multimineral because you don't have a healthy GI tract, then it's kind of useless. So, and when a patient comes to me in the pharmacy and they have any kind of GI disturbance, whether it be irritable bowel, whether it be diarrhea, whether it be constipation, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, anything like that, the first thing I talk about is probiotics.
Right.
I think that's very important. So do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. That's definitely part of the protocols that we recommend at Ortho. And then supplementation, it could range anywhere from 23 billion to 250 billion. I mean, there's been studies on trillions with patients with IBD. The research on using probiotics is relatively safe. Yeah. So I would highly recommend it. But really base it off your symptoms. I mean, you could do some sort of GI testing, but if based on your symptoms, I would recommend like IBS, IBD, more severe. I would recommend 100 billion and up. Mm-hmm. And then for more of like a maintenance and prevention, maybe mild GI discomfort, 23 billion would be great. Yeah. Perfect. That's exactly what I take every day. I've got family members that have had the sense of urgency and discomfort, mm-hmm. and it's changed their lives. Yeah, I mean, they're more comfortable, and they don't have to run out the door or tap me on the shoulder. Hey, you got to get out of here.
It's amazing, and Orthobiotic is the one that I normally recommend. And one thing I like about it is we'll get a little bit fancy here, but one thing I like about it is it's got Saccharomyces boulardii in it. Yeah, that's a fancy word for a pathogen. Or non-pathogenic yeast. Can you go a little bit into that? Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I like about Saccharomyces boulardii is that the research on it is really strong on eradicating C. diff. Yep. So great for people who travel. But in combination therapy in the orthobiotic, we have lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. And Saccharomyces boulardii. And with that combination, the research shows that Saccharomyces boulardii helps really outcompete the bad bacteria, allowing the beneficial bacteria to thrive. So it's a really smart, intelligent formulation, and really powerful.
Yeah, I will tell you, I was impressed one time when I talked to a GI doctor, gastroenterologist, who would recommend, and he graduated back in the early 70s, and he was telling me studies about Saccharomyces boulardii and how it worked for C. difficile. And for our listeners and viewers that don't know what C. difficile is, it's a bacteria that can become resistant to multiple antibiotics, and a lot of times the reason people get it is because they've been on antibiotics. So the antibiotics kill all the bad bacteria, but then they let some other bacteria overgrow. And there's been studies to show in the 70s even that Saccharomyces boulardii can help C. difficile, which there are antibiotics that are resistant. A lot of antibiotics are resistant. It's resistant to a lot of antibiotics. So, that's very, very encouraging. I know we had a patient one time that was in the nursing home, and they were doing everything they could with all kinds of IV antibiotics, and she came into us as kind of a last resort, and we recommended high dose orthobiotic with Saccharomyces boulardii in it. I think she even bought some Saccharomyces boulardii separately, and we might have recommended a different probiotic. What's the Ortho 225 or something?
225.
Yeah, I recommended that too. Anyway, we did a pretty high concentration protocol with her, and she recovered. It was amazing. Nothing else had worked for months. Right. So it's very, very reassuring. That's why I like that product, and it doesn't have to be refrigerated.
Right. Shelf stable non-refrigeration.
Yeah. Now it's not that what I think, and help educate our listeners and viewers. It's not that the bacteria don't necessarily need to be. They would be more stable if refrigerated, right. But the way you guys produce it, you guys overproduce it, so you guys are guaranteeing it that up to this expiration date, it will be good at room temperature, correct?
Right, exactly. And we use a FluoroFit technology, which really coats the microorganisms. I like to think of like an M&M, right? We have it covers it, the chocolates, the organisms, okay. And really that allows them to stay viable during the harshest part of creating a probiotic, which is the freeze drying process. So having stability and through that freeze drying process creates stability for the microorganisms. And we put, since they get an overage, we know it degrades at a significantly slower rate than someone that doesn't use fluorofit technology or a company that doesn't use fluorofit technology. But yeah, it's always important to put the right amount of overage to match what is in there at expiration date. So if it's a 14% degradation rate and it has 100 billion CFU, you're going to need 114 billion.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That makes sense. All right. Well, thanks for clearing that up. Yeah. So in our next segment, we're gonna we'll start to hit on a little bit here. We're gonna go into adrenal stressors, and I will just hit on that a little bit. So for listeners and viewers, and for myself, I like to revisit this so I can educate myself and learn from Julian. But our adrenal glands are glands right above our kidney, ad meaning above, renal meaning kidney. So right above our kidneys, they are about the size of a pea, and they produce hormones in response to stress. If you guys have heard of adrenaline, also known as epinephrine, scientifically, that is what is produced in our adrenal glands to the fight or flight, the immediate fight or flight that we need to run or fight right now is the adrenaline part. They also produce cortisol. And cortisol is a hormone produced in adrenal glands in response to stress. It's produced in a diurnal variation. We spoke before on the show about diurnal variation. Our bodies, we are meant to work during the day. My hats go off to all the people that do have to work nights, because we do need those people, whether it be nurses or doctors or firefighters or police officers that work shift work. But our bodies are used to a diurnal variation, and that's what we're born to do. So, our adrenal glands produce cortisol to help us respond to stress, not only physical stress, but mental stress. And it should be highest in the morning and slowly to go down throughout the day until it's lowest. It should be lowest at like 2 o'clock in the morning, when we should be sleeping and resting and recovering. So if our bodies do not follow that pattern, it can really, really mess many things up. And our adrenal glands trump everything. So if there's a hierarchy of different glands that produce hormones, and hormones is a very generic term, I've talked about that, it's a very broad term. I've talked about that in the show before. We have a hierarchy, and it goes adrenal glands, thyroid, our sex hormones, which is for men testes, and for women ovaries. And your adrenal glands trump everything. If our adrenal glands are not in balance, nothing below it will be in balance. So having your thyroid balanced or having your sex hormones balanced does not as much good as if you can have your adrenals balanced also. Because without our adrenal glands, we will die. We can live without a thyroid gland. We can live without our testes or our ovaries. Not very happily without those, but with our adrenal glands, we will die almost instantly. So in our next segment, we will get more into how we can help our adrenal glands, support our adrenal glands. So you are listening to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. We have Julian Martinez in the studio with us at AM 1470 KBSN in Moses Lake. Be part of the show. Call in 509-765-1470. We'll see you in a few. Hello and welcome back to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham. Call in. Ask Julian a question. We are here with Julian. We went through our first 2 segments talking about vitamin and mineral supplementation and how important it can be for overall health. So call in 509-765-1470. And our first caller that we have today, we will give you a free box of vitamin D3. So take advantage of that. Call in 509-765-1470. All right, to continue our discussion on adrenal stress, let's go into so Julian, I'm going to ask you. So there's a few different ways to test our cortisol levels. Is it necessary to test our cortisol levels? Is there a simpler way? I know we recommend what's called diurnal cortisol testing, where patients can do a saliva test and they can test to see what their cortisol levels are doing in the morning, at noon, in the evening, and at night, to see if it's following that diurnal pattern. Is that the only way to test it?
So that's a really good question. I think there's definitely efficient ways at figuring out what could potentially be your primary key stressor. And To really step back and kind of give you the history on how we've developed 4 key stressors. It really started off with the book that was talking about adrenal fatigue, and there were supplements to support it. Our director of science, Dr. Tom Williams, he dove a lot deeper into it and started looking at adrenal fatigue as HPA axis dysfunction, looking at the hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenal glands and how they connect. So going into that, totally lost my train of thought.
That's all right. That's right. So the adrenal fatigue book.
Yeah, adrenal fatigue.
That's
book.
the James Wilson book.
James Wilson.
Okay. Yeah. We'll put a note in our we'll put that in our show notes so the listeners will know about that.
Yeah. So really today chronic stress is really evolved. And I think looking at the hypothalamus with the pituitary adrenal gland, what we were able to narrow it down to as what's causing the primary key stressors are circadian rhythm dysregulation, mental and emotional stress, blood sugar dysregulation, and inflammation. So these are all 4 key stressors that you can really lock in and figure out which one is your key stressor causing the chronic stress throughout the body, the chronic release of cortisol. And with Orthomolecular Products, we have a sister company called the Lifestyle Matrix Resource Center that has educational tools for practitioners and pharmacists to really go deep on those questions. But yeah, I think before you go into the testing, I think you can look at the primary key stressors. But if you do want an overall clear picture, I think it's a great idea to do a testing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we get a hold of this form? How do we get a form to our listeners or viewers? How do they get a form like that?
Yeah. So I don't think I mentioned this in the beginning, but we are exclusive to practitioners and pharmacists, and so a great way to do it is actually come to your pharmacy, take the test, find out what your primary key stressor is. It'll take 30 seconds to a minute, but really you'll be able to narrow in. Maybe it's blood sugar dysregulation. Maybe you're going from hyper to hypoglycemic throughout the day and it's causing constant stress on you. Maybe it's inflammation. Maybe it's the lack of rest. When we talk about rest, maybe you're not sleeping well enough, or maybe it's just your perceived stress. Everybody has a different perceived stress, and stress has evolved to where that we have now recommended nutrient solutions that can help address some of those mental and emotional stress.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for clearing that up. So, so what are some of those? What are some of those lifestyle? Before we get into the supplementation, what are some of the lifestyle modifications that we could make when it comes to blood sugar regulation, when it comes to circadian rhythm? Go into that.
Yeah, absolutely. So as far as circadian rhythm, I always just recommend high quality sleep, really powering down any type of blue light, a couple hours before bed, and getting quality sleep is going to be key. Exercise. As far as diet, adding the fibers and the proteins and not having, so heavy on the carbohydrates, but supplementing a really full picture of macronutrients where you have protein, carbs, and fats.
Yeah, that's awesome. And speaking of that, we talked a little bit about essential fatty acids. They're essential to the body. They're essential because our body can't make them. There's the same thing with amino acids. Mm-hmm. So essential amino acids, which means we have to eat those amino acids. Now, I am not an anti-carb guy by any means. I'm an endurance athlete, so I need to eat carbs, but there is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. Let me make that clear. There is no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. So we do not have to eat carbs to live. Now, that's really oversimplified. So, but, those essential fatty acids and essential amino acids we have to get from our dietary source, because from those other sources, sources, we can make carbohydrates. And it could be because glucose is the major fuel in our body. So our body has all kinds of different ways to make a carb, which is glucose, which is essentially usually fuels the cell. Not all the time, but most of the time is what is the go-to for the cell. So I won't get too much on a tangent on that, but I just want to let everybody know that this is all part of a lifestyle change. Eating, exercise, and rest is all those 3 go together. So speaking of the eating, go in a little bit into the supplementation. So if there are blood glucose dysregulation, what are some things that we can do what are some supplements that we could take to help regulate that?
Yeah, we have a product called Glycemicor. That's a functional food. When I say functional food, it's got recommended nutrients that support blood sugar dysregulation. It's high on fermentable soluble fibers, which really help the body create satiety, right? So instead of having that really roller coaster levels of glucose, it's going to help really regulate that and help you make smarter decisions throughout the day.
Yeah. So is there anything else to help with like insulin resistance or, to help lower actual blood glucose levels at all?
Yeah. So I would recommend, as far as supplementation, right? It all comes down to lifestyle modifications, but to supplement that, I typically recommend alpha lipoic acid, berberine, chromium.
Tell me about chromium. I was thinking about that. Tell me about chromium and how it helps with glucose sensitivity.
Yeah, so essentially, 4 chromium molecules bind to the insulin receptor door, allowing for allowing for glucose to be shuttled into the mitochondria. Yep. That's what we need as far as using glucose as a fuel source. When you become insulin resistant, then the insulin is no longer uptaking the glucose.
Right. So yeah. Ortho has a great product called Dioxinol, which I think is wonderful to help for glucose regulation. So, but like Julian says, it's important to have a good healthy diet first. So yeah. Let's talk a little bit about circadian rhythm. If the circadian rhythm is off, what are some supplements that we could do to help our circadian rhythm?
Yeah. I think. Looking at the full picture of HPA axis dysfunction, looking at your stress response, are you hypercortisol? Are you waking up stressed and wired? Addressing how your stress response looks first thing in the morning is going to help regulate and set it up for a normal response throughout the day. So I always recommend Adrenal, which is going to be more of like a stressed and wired person or patient that has phosphatidylserine to help modulate cortisol. It has L-theanine, adaptogens, which really help with stress resiliency and your ability to handle stress. But believe it or not, I think just considering that stress has evolved, more and more people are actually more in the hypocortisol. I think a lot of people have been stressed for a long time.
Yeah.
So having additional B vitamins and also adaptogens and components that are really going to help stimulate the half-life of cortisol, like licorice root liquid, and then supplementing things like 5-HTP and melatonin to get your sleep regulated.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think about when we think about hypocortisol would be, if you read the book Adrenal Fatigue, it would be more based on hypocortisol, which are cortisol levels low, which means we're feeling chronically tired. And a lot of times how that happens is, when we're chronically stressed and our cortisol is on hyperdrive all the time, our body kind of finally says, okay, I can't keep doing this. You do it for months and months and months. You're not getting good sleep and you're not eating right. And you have, a really stressful event in your life, whether it be, your parents died or there was a childhood trauma, something like that. And then your body finally says, okay, I got it. I can't keep up anymore. And then your adrenals just quit producing cortisol and then you're chronically fatigued. So that's when some of the nutrient supplementations can come into play during that time. Now realize one of the things is Julian mentioned circadian rhythm and we talked about sleep. If we're not getting sleep, our bodies cannot recover. We cannot hit that home enough on this show if we're not getting proper sleep. And there are some things to help with that. First of all, especially for women, it's not that progesterone can't be used for men, but when I think of women that can't sleep, the first thing I think of is a progesterone deficiency. Progesterone helps to regulate cortisol and will help decrease that cortisol level, especially at night. So oral progesterone at night, especially for women, can help regulate their cortisol levels and help them sleep better. Many women will report they sleep better the first night after taking one dose of progesterone. So that's very, very important because if you're not sleeping, your adrenals are not going to get better, period. So melatonin is another one. Melatonin is a hormone. Melatonin is kind of opposite of cortisol. So usually when cortisol is low, melatonin should be high. So at night, our melatonin levels should be higher when our cortisol levels are are lower. So melatonin is very, very important when it comes to regulating our sleep. So don't forget about that. So what else would you like to add on about adrenal stress and supplementations for adrenal stress?
I really like. We launched a couple new formulations where we're really going after cognitive support as well. There's a raw material that I'm really excited about, which is Bacopa, which has been really shown to have more of like a neuroprotective mechanism to help getting more oxygen and nutrients and blood flow to the brain. I think those are things to really consider when we're thinking of a formulation as well, just because we notice that, or we see that cognitive decline is on a rise right now. So really supporting the brain function with antioxidant support and then additional adaptogens, I think is going to be really going to help regulate or modulate the stress response.
Awesome. Yeah. So we're getting ready to wrap up the show here already. An hour goes fast, as it does every Monday. So I'm just letting you guys know we stream live every Monday at 1 to 2 p.m. on my personal Facebook. Follow me on Facebook. I am maxed out on friends, so unfortunately I can't take many more friends, but please follow me. You can still follow me. Would love to have you follow so you don't miss the show. Also, we stream live on YouTube, and we archive the episodes on YouTube. It's on the Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy YouTube channel. Also, don't forget about us on Instagram. It's on my personal Instagram site, so Health Solutions with Shawn Needham. Follow us on Instagram. We have little 1-minute video clips, and when Instagram kind of allows us, we will stream live to that profile also with our streaming software. Right now, you got to do it directly from Instagram, and to stream to three platforms at the same time, they make it impossible. So also podcast forums. Don't forget about our podcast forums: SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Podcasts. In fact, speaking of Google, just Google Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, and it will come up on the podcast forum. So, Julian, we got 1 minute. So how would you like to end the show, and let us know how to get more information about Orthomolecular Products?
Okay, I got 1 minute. So I would you can check out our website, orthomolecularproducts.com. But if you're looking for more educational resources, the Lifestyle Matrix Resource Center has 5 clinical programs that goes into GI, cardiometabolic, stress, immune, and musculoskeletal. Really great resources on there. Great webinars. Just to add a note, we have the opportunity to live a high quality life. I would take every advantage of every minute that we have and really add lifestyle modifications like diet and exercise to your life. And I wish you all the best.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julian. And speaking of adding quality to our life, next week we have Joy Howard on the show. You do not want to miss it. She's an amazing lady that has turned back time on age. So next Monday, follow us and check out the Facebook page. You're listening to Health Solutions with Shawn and Janet Needham, and we'll see you Monday.